I had spent 15 years in Rathai's jade trade. Tonight was another routine trip to a private auction to pick up stock. On the outside, these auctions moved jade, but behind closed doors, they sometimes moved people. I had just walked into the back when I spotted a teenager huddled in the corner, covered head to toe in bruises and welts. He looked up at me with desperate eyes. A second later, lines of text floated across my vision. This is Arden Carlisle, the fake son of the Carlisle family in Harstead. The real Carlisle son framed him, and his own sister shipped him out here to teach him a lesson. It's awful. He's been shocked, whipped, and beaten. Now, they're about to strip him and put him on the block. The real Carlisle's son and his people are in the auction hall right now, waiting to watch him get humiliated. I lived by one simple rule. If it was not my problem, I would not get involved. I turned to leave. However, another line then appeared. Oh my God. The jade dealer is his biological father. My heart clenched. The words that had appeared out of thin air hit me like a freight train. I did have a missing son. I had been searching for him for 15 years. However, if there was one thing Rathai never ran short of, it was scams and traps. I looked away, keeping my expression neutral as I weighed the piece of jade in my hand. I turned to the man running the venue, Sal Keever. Good color. Sal, has anything new come in lately? My eyes drifted back to the corner as I spoke. The way the boy was curled up, the pattern of wounds across his body, none of it looked staged. Sal grinned. Yeah, a fresh batch just arrived. You want to take a look, Cade? Another line of text floated past. The boss is thinking about it. Did he just remember his own son? I pretended to browse the stock, working my way over to the boy until I was close enough to crouch down in front of him. He was shaking all over, eyes full of desperation and distrust. His knuckles were swollen and raw, with dirt ground deep under his fingernails. Those were the marks of someone who had been restrained for a long time and fought against it. I kept my voice low. What's your name? Where are you from? His lips were cracked and bleeding. His voice barely carried over into my ears. Arden Carlisle. I'm from Harstead. Who sent you here? Tears rolled down his filthy face. Bryn. My sister, no. The eldest Carlisle daughter. More text appeared. The real son, Corbin Carlisle, framed Arden. He pushed him down a staircase and accused him of hiring someone to ruin Corbin's reputation. Bryn believed it. She shipped him to Rathai to learn a lesson, and told him he could come home once he learned to behave. The boy's trembling worsened, as though something terrible had clawed its way back to the surface. I did not press him. I just stood up. I had heard enough. Everything he told me matched what the floating text had said, and that was enough to confirm one thing. This was not a scam. This boy could very well be my son. I walked back to Sal. I'm taking that boy with me. Sal's expression tightened. Cade, this one's not that simple. The eldest Carlisle daughter paid a fortune for this. There are specific instructions to work him over. The only rule was not to let him die. I pulled out a rough jade stone. This should more than cover him. Sal's eyes locked on the jade. His throat bobbed, but he shook his head. Cade, it's not about the money. The Carlisles have serious pull back home. If I let him go and Bryn comes after me, I can't afford that kind of heat. I held his gaze and did not back down. Sal, I've been doing business in Rathai for 15 years. When have I ever shortchanged you? He gave me a pained smile. Cade, don't put me in this spot. The auction's about to start. The Carlisle people are out there waiting. Bryn said he has to go on the block. She wants to watch him get humiliated with her own eyes. I clenched my fists until my nails bit into my palms. Sal turned to leave, but I grabbed his arm. What if I insist? His expression hardened. Cade, you know how things work here. Taking someone by force means you've got a problem with us. I let go and steadied myself. Here's what we'll do. You hand him over to me, and I handle Bryn. If she comes after you, that's on me. Sal hesitated. Cade, can you really handle that? The Carlisles have serious connections back home. I let out a cold laugh and said slowly, I've been in Rathai for 15 years. I've had blood on my hands, and I've pulled people out from under the knife. The Carlisles can be as powerful as they want. Their reach doesn't extend out here. He shook his head again. It's not happening. You don't understand. Bryn gave specific instructions, and I can't afford to screw this up. Cade, you should go. I did not waste any more words. I turned and walked back to the holding room. The floating text kept scrolling. Arden has been locked up for 7 days. He's been shocked 3 times, and the whippings happen every single day. He's covered in injuries. If this keeps up, he's going to die. Bryn has no idea what Rathai actually is. She thinks it's just a few days of scaring him straight. I pulled out my phone and hit speed dial. A few minutes later, my 5 bodyguards arrived. I walked straight into the holding room. Arden was still huddled in the corner, staring at me blankly. I crouched down and checked his injuries. Up close, they were far worse than what I had seen from a distance. His back was covered in lash marks, some already blackened and festering. His arms were dotted with circular burn scars from electrical shocks, new ones layered over old. Can you walk? He nodded and struggled to his feet, but his legs buckled, and he nearly collapsed. I caught him and turned to my bodyguards. Get him out of here. We had barely cleared the holding area when a crowd surged in from the far end of the corridor. Sal stood at the front, his expression dark. Mr. Brennan, what exactly do you think you're doing? Taking someone off my property? I stepped in front of Arden. Sal, I already told you. I'm taking this boy, and I will pay you every cent he's worth. Sal laughed, but there was nothing warm about it. Money? What the Carlisles are offering is a long-term partnership. You're one man, Brennan. What do you have that can compete with an entire family? My bodyguards drew their guns. Sal's men raised theirs, and the two sides locked into a standoff. Sal lit a cigarette. Mr. Brennan, I'm giving you one last chance out of respect for the years we've done business together. Leave the boy and walk away. The auction's about to start, and the Carlisle people are here. If you walk out with him, I have nothing to tell them. I held his stare. And if I take him anyway? His smile vanished. Then don't blame me for what happens next. Tate, one of my bodyguards, leaned in close. Boss, they've got us outnumbered. The floating text turned frantic. It's over. The boss only has 5 men, and Sal has at least 30. Bryn and Corbin found out Arden never made it to the auction floor. They're heading over with people right now. They're already at the door. The words had barely faded when footsteps echoed behind me. I heard the sharp click of heels on concrete, unhurried and deliberate. A group emerged from the far end of the corridor. The woman at the front was young, dressed in a tailored suit, her expression cool and assessing. She carried herself like someone accustomed to looking down on everyone in the room. The boy beside her wore a crisp white casual outfit, his hair styled to perfection, and the look he gave Arden was pure, unconcealed malice. Here they come. Bryn and Corbin. Corbin is really playing the part. If you didn't know better, you'd think he was here to rescue his brother. Bryn surveyed the standoff and let her gaze settle on me. Her brow creased. Then she turned to Sal, her tone sharp with displeasure. Mr. Keever, why is our merchandise still here? The auction is about to begin. Sal hurried over to her with a placating smile. Ms. Carlisle, I wasn't expecting you to come down here personally. We've got a small situation, but it will be sorted out momentarily. Bryn's eyes moved from me to Arden standing behind me. She looked at him the way a person would look at a piece of inventory. Who is this? She asked Sal. Cade Brennan. He's in the jade trade. Sal gestured between us. Cade, this is MS. Carlisle, from the Carlisle family in Harstead. Only then did Bryn look at me properly, sizing me up with undisguised contempt. Mr. Brennan? A businessman out here in Rathai? I did not respond. I reached into my pocket and drew out a piece of jade, letting it rest in my open palm. Under the lights, the stone was luminous all the way through, and even in vivid green without a single flaw. It was the kind of specimen that was rare even among the finest old mine glass jade. MS. Carlisle, I hear you came to Rathai looking for quality stones. I held the jade out a little further. This is imperial green. Its market value sits around $8 million. I'm offering it for the boy. Bryn's gaze lingered on the jade for just a moment. I caught the flicker in her eyes. Anyone who knew stones understood that a piece like this was a once-in-a-lifetime offer. However, she looked away just as quickly, her tone indifferent. That's a generous offer, Mr. Brennan, but the Carlisle family isn't short on money. I put the jade away, unfazed. Then what is Ms. Carlisle short on? Mining claims? Distribution channels? Or do you need connections in Rathai? You can move mountains back home, but out here, there are things money cannot solve. Bryn's eyes narrowed slightly, and she studied me again with renewed interest. Corbin poked his head out from behind her and snapped, Bryn, don't listen to him. He's obviously working with Arden. I ignored him entirely and kept my eyes on Bryn. Ms. Carlisle, you sent the boy to a place like this because you wanted to teach him a lesson. Now, someone is willing to pay a premium to take him off your hands. You walk away with the money and your dignity intact. Why wouldn't you take that deal? Bryn was silent for a moment, as though weighing her options. Sal cut in from the side, looking uncomfortable. Cade, it's not that I don't want to do you this favor. What a mess. Carlisle is offering isn't a one-time payment. It's a long-term partnership. If I let him go, who's going to trust me after this? I turned to him, my voice even. Sal, I've been in Rathai for 15 years. When have I ever shortchanged you? That pipeline you've got running back into the country. Who do you think built it for you? Sal's expression shifted. I kept going. Think it through. What the Carlisles are giving you is money. Money runs out, and you make more. But if what I have on you ever sees daylight, money won't matter, because you'll be dead. His eyes darted away, and he said nothing. Bryn frowned, her tone cooling. Mr. Brennan, is that a threat? I turned back to her, perfectly composed. Miss Carlisle, you misunderstood me. I'm just talking business. You can run everything back home, but this is Rathai. One phone call from me, and your shipments will sit at the border for 3 months. Believe it or don't. Bryn's face darkened. She fixed me with a sharp stare. Mr. Brennan, are you threatening me? Still not a threat. I met her gaze without flinching. Just a reminder. If you intend to humiliate this boy like a piece of merchandise, then you and I are going to do business. If you won't sell, I'll take him. If you bring people in from back home, I will make sure you cannot move an inch in Rathai. You're a long way from your own territory, Miss Carlisle, and you're not nearly as powerful out here as you think. The corridor went quiet for several seconds. Corbin finally lost his composure and shrieked, "Who do you think you are, talking to my sister like that?" He jabbed a trembling finger at me. Bryn. Look at him. He's obviously in on this with Arden. Have your people grab him right now. Bryn raised a hand and silenced him. She looked at me and smiled, though the smile never reached her eyes. You're an interesting man, Mr. Brennan. Her tone shifted. But when it comes down to it, everything you've said is just about protecting this boy. Do you even know him? Do you have any idea what he's done? I looked right at her. Do you? Bryn blinked, caught off guard. I spoke slowly, and I made every word count. You say he hurt Corbin. Where's the evidence? You say he stole from you. What did he take? You say he tried to harm someone. What was his motive? Whatever Corbin told you, you believed it without question. Did you investigate? Did you ask Arden? Did you give him a single chance to defend himself? Bryn's expression went cold. Mr. Brennan, the Carlisle family's affairs are none of your concern. I smiled, and it was not a kind one. Miss Carlisle, you've made quite a name for yourself in the business world. Are you really telling me you made a judgment based on one side of the story? I'm not meddling. I'm just telling you that you're making a fool of yourself. Corbin screamed, "Do you have a death wish? You just insulted my sister." I turned a cold glare on him. Shut your mouth. Corbin's eyes went wide, as though it had never occurred to him that someone would dare speak to him that way. I did not spare him another glance. My focus stayed on Bryn. You say he's the fake son, so he deserves to be tortured. You say he hurt Corbin, so he deserves to be shipped to a place like this. You say he's a criminal, so he deserves to be stripped naked and auctioned off. Then let me ask you something. If it were Corbin tied up in here today, would you do the same to him? Bryn's pupils contracted sharply. Corbin erupted again. What the hell are you talking about? I'm the real Carlisle's son. He's AB** starred. Some nobody who crawled out of nowhere. He deserves it. He deserves to be sold into the filthiest hole they can find. Corbin. Bryn's voice cracked like a whip, silencing him instantly. The floating text exploded. Corbin's panicking. There it is. Now we're seeing who he really is. Look at Bryn's expression. She's starting to waver. Bryn stared at me, something complicated moving behind her eyes. She said nothing for a long time. No one else spoke either. When she finally spoke, her voice was hoarse. Mr. Brennan, what exactly do you want? I did not answer. Instead, I reached over and pulled open the torn front of Arden's jacket. Arden flinched and let out a startled sound, but he did not pull away. The wounds beneath were laid bare under the lights. Lash marks crisscrossed his torso, some still seeping blood. The worst of it was just below his collarbone, where electrical burns had left the skin charred and curling back from the flesh. I turned those wounds toward Bryn. Miss Carlisle, is this what you meant by teaching him a lesson? Bryn's pupils tightened, and a visible tremor passed across her face. Corbin's expression faltered, but he recovered almost immediately. Bryn, the people out here just don't know the rules. They went a little overboard. Shut up. Bryn's voice dropped low. Corbin, what's this? Corbin's lips trembled. Bryn. I did not give him the chance to talk his way out. Bryn, you've lived in comfort and privilege your entire life. Do you know what it feels like to have a whip tear across your skin? Do you know that when a shock baton is held against flesh, the meat actually burns? This isn't a lesson. This is attempted murder. Bryn went quiet. She stared at Arden's wounds for a long time. Then, she raised her head and looked at me. Mr. Brennan. This is a Carlisle family matter. I scoffed. A family matter? Torturing someone until they look like this is a family matter? Bryn drew a deep breath, visibly fighting to keep her composure. Mr. Brennan, I don't want to waste any more time with you. Name your price. How much will it take for you to walk away? I looked at her, and something about it struck me as deeply absurd. Even now, she still believed everything could be solved with money. I don't want money. I want the boy. Bryn's patience finally broke. She turned to Sal and gave the order. Move in. Whatever happens, I'll take full responsibility. Sal waved his hand, and his men closed in with weapons raised. Tate and the others lifted their guns in response. The standoff was instant. Corbin cowered behind Bryn and hissed, "Hurry up. Drag him away." Two of Sal's men rushed forward and reached for Arden. I spun around and shielded him with my body, planting myself between them like a wall. My gaze cut across Bryn and Corbin like a blade. "Don't you dare touch him." My voice filled the corridor. "Your family raised him for 20 years, and you think that gives you the right to buy and sell him like merchandise? To degrade him? To destroy him? Bryn, you listen to me. What you call discipline is a crime. It's attempted murder. I'm telling you right now, here and in front of everyone, that none of you have the right to take him." I drew a shaking breath, and my voice wavered for the first time. "Because he's my son. He's Cade Brennan's son, and I've been looking for him for 15 years. Silence smothered the corridor. The low hum of fluorescent lights overhead felt deafening against the stillness. Sal's cigarette hung motionless between his lips, an inch of gray ash trembling on the tip. The guards holding their weapons glanced between me and Arden, their fingers loosening slightly on their triggers. Behind Bryn, Corbin let out a shrill, hysterical laugh that cut through the tension like glass. "Your son? You think we're idiots?" Corbin took half a step forward, his voice climbing an octave. "Bryn, look at this. Arden must have found some local muscle online before he got shipped out. He's running a scam to save his skin. How convenient that a jade dealer out in the middle of nowhere claims this stray is his flesh and blood." Bryn didn't laugh. Her gaze was locked onto my face, then darted down to Arden's trembling silhouette behind me. For the first time, her pristine, aristocratic mask had fractured. The floating text rippled across the edge of my sight, bright and relentless. "Look at Corbin sweating. He knows Arden has the Brennan Crescent birthmark behind his left ear, the exact mark Cade has been searching for across 3 provinces. Bryn is trying to calculate the odds. She knows the Carlisle family adopted Arden from an unlicensed border orphanage 15 years ago after their real infant was supposedly lost in a raid. Sal knows who Cade is. Sal knows Cade once leveled a rival syndicate in northern Rathai with 10 men and a crate of dynamite. Sal is terrified. I didn't blink. I kept my hand firmly on Arden's shoulder, feeling the violent tremors racking his emaciated frame. The boy was staring up at the back of my coat, his breathing shallow and ragged, his eyes wide with a mixture of terror and utter bewilderment. "Sal," I said, my voice dropping to a low, lethal hum that carried down the concrete hallway. "I gave you a choice. Now I'm taking it back." Sal swallowed hard, the ash finally dropping onto his boot. "Cade, let's not do this here. MS. Carlisle is Tate," I commanded without turning around. Before Sal could finish his sentence, the heavy steel double doors at the far end of the corridor banged open with a deafening crash. Heavy footsteps echoed through the hallway as a dozen armed men in black tactical gear poured into the corridor, submachine guns raised, their barrels instantly locking onto Sal's 30 mercenaries. The air sucked out of the room. Sal's men instantly raised their hands, their eyes wide with panic. "Mr. Brennan's territory ends where the mountain ends," Tate announced coldly, racking the slide of his sidearm. "You forgot who owns the roads you used to move. Your stones, Sal." Sal raised both hands, his face pale as chalk. "Hold fire. Nobody shoot. Stand down. Lower the damn guns." Corbin backed away until his shoulders hit the concrete wall. What is this?" "Bryn. Tell your security to shoot them." "Shut up, Corbin." Bryn snapped, her voice cracking. She turned to me, her chest heaving, the realization finally dawning on her that in this godforsaken corner of Rathai, the Carlisle name carried no weight at all. Her high society breeding, her billions, her legal connections in Harstead, none of it meant a single thing 3 feet from the jungle. "Mr. Brennan," Bryn said, forcing her voice to stay level, though her fingers dug into the fabric of her tailored slacks. "Even if what you say is true, Arden grew up in our house. We fed him, clothed him, gave him an elite education. If you want to take him, there is a legal process." "A legal process?" I took one slow step toward her. Bryn instinctively took half a step back. "You dragged him into an underground auction house to be stripped, whipped, and sold to the highest bidder," I said, each syllable hitting like a hammer. "You didn't ask for a judge when you put an electric baton against his collarbone. You didn't ask for a contract when you let these animals break his fingers." I turned my head slightly, catching Arden's terrified eyes. "You gave him 20 years of shelter just to turn him into a sacrifice for your pet serpent." I glanced at Corbin. The boy shrank against the wall, trembling under my gaze. "Take the boy," I told Tate. "Bring the private medical van around. If anyone steps within 10 feet of him, put a bullet through their knee." "Yes, boss." Two of my men gently flanked Arden, shielding him from view as they moved him down the corridor. As Arden passed me, his cracked lips parted, and a single raw whisper escaped. "Are you, really?" "I'm your father," I said, my voice softening just enough for him to hear. "You're safe now. Nobody in this world will ever lay a finger on you again." Tears cut clean lines through the dried blood and grime on his cheeks. He didn't say another word before my men carried him through the steel doors. Bryn took an involuntary step forward. "Arden." I stepped into her path, cutting off her line of sight. "Don't speak his name," I said quietly. "Miss Carlisle, enjoy your stay in Rathai. Because as long as my son bleeds, not a single ounce of jade, not a single crate of raw stone, and not a single contract bearing the Carlisle name will leave this border alive." I looked past her to Corbin, whose face had gone completely gray. "And you," I said to the trembling boy. "You'd better pray Arden recovers. Because if he loses so much as a finger, I will tear Harstead apart stone by stone to collect the debt." I turned on my heel and walked out, leaving Bryn Carlisle standing in the dim corridor, the silence of ruin settling heavy over her shoulders. The smell of antiseptic and ozone filled the private suite of the hillside clinic. Dar. Ronald, my personal physician who had patched up my men through 15 years of border turf wars, pulled off his surgical gloves and dropped them into the steel tray with a heavy sigh. "3 fractured ribs," Ronald said, pointing to the glowing x-rays pinned against the light box. "Severe blunt force trauma to the thoracic wall. 3rd-degree electrical burn marks near the left clavicle and across both wrists. Malnutrition, acute dehydration, and localized infection in the whip. Lacerations on his back." Ronald looked at me through his thick spectacles. If he had stayed in that cellar another 48 hours, septic shock would have killed him. Whoever ordered this didn't want him disciplined, Cade. They wanted him broken beyond repair. I stood by the glass partition, looking into the recovery room. Arden lay on the white hospital bed, swallowed by the oversized sheets. And 4 line ran into the back of his bruised hand, and a monitor beeped in a steady, fragile rhythm. Even in deep sedation, his brows remained tightly furrowed, his fingers twitching as if fighting off invisible blows. The floating text drifted across the glass. "Arden is dreaming about the day he was kicked out of the Carlisle Manor. It was pouring rain. Corbin threw Arden's scholarship acceptance letter into the mud and stamped on it, laughing that low-born fake had no right to go to university." Bryn stood on the porch under an umbrella, telling Arden that if he truly cared about the Carlisle name, he would kneel in the mud and apologize to Corbin. Arden knelt for 6 hours in the storm until he collapsed from hypothermia. Nobody opened the door. My knuckles cracked as my hands closed into tight fists in my coat pockets. 15 years ago, my convoy had been ambushed on the northern border during a territorial dispute. My wife had been killed, and our 6-month-old infant had vanished in the chaos, taken by a human trafficking ring that scattered into the southern provinces. For 15 years, I had clawed my way to the very top of Rathai's jade underworld, building a network of gold, stone, and blood, with only one purpose: to find my boy. I had imagined finding him in an orphanage, or working in a factory, or living a quiet life in some distant city. I never imagined he had been raised by the wealthiest family in Harstead, only to be discarded like garbage the moment their biological heir returned. "Boss," Tate walked in quietly, holding a sealed envelope. The rapid DNA panel came back from the lab in the capital. 6-hour express. I took the envelope. My hands, which had never shaken while pulling a trigger or holding $1 million rough jade, trembled as I tore open the seal. At the bottom of the test report, the numbers stood clear and incontrovertible. Probability of paternity, 99.998%. "It's him," Tate whispered, his rough face softening with rare emotion. "It's really the young master." "Clear the perimeter," I said, my voice thick. "Nobody enters this floor without my permission." I pushed open the door to the recovery room and walked inside. The scent of medicinal salves filled the air. I pulled a wooden chair up to the side of the bed and sat down. As if sensing a presence, Arden's eyelids fluttered, and he gasped awake, his body violently jerking back against the pillows. His right arm came up instinctively to shield his face. Please, don't shock me again." I didn't push him, I swear I didn't. He choked out, his voice hoarse and broken from days of screaming. "Arden." I reached out slowly, keeping my movements deliberate, and placed my hand gently over his trembling forearm. He froze. His wide, bloodshot eyes stared at me, trembling with raw confusion. "You're not in the cellar," I said softly, my thumb brushing against the clean bandage on his wrist. "You're in my clinic. The people who hurt you are gone." Arden stared at me for a long time. His gaze dropped to my hand holding his. Then drifted up to my face. Why are you doing this? Arden whispered, a fresh wave of tears welling in his eyes. Sal said. Corbin paid them to make sure I never came back to Harstead. Bryn said I had to be taught a lesson. Why would a stranger buy me for $8 million? I reached up and gently moved the hair away from behind his left ear. There. Pale against his skin, was a distinct crescent-shaped birthmark. I'm not a stranger, Arden, I said, pulling out the DNA report and laying it on the blanket in front of him. 15 years ago, you were taken from me during a raid on the border. Your real name is Leo Brennan. You are my son. Arden looked down at the paper. He couldn't read all the medical jargon, but his eyes locked onto the bottom line, onto our names printed side by side. A son, he murmured, his voice breaking. No, the Carlisle said I was an orphan from the streets. They said I was a parasite who stole Corbin's life for 20 years. Bryn told me that everything I had, my clothes, my education, my dignity, belonged to Corbin, and that I had to pay it back with my life. He looked at me, his chest heaving with choked sobs. I didn't steal anything. I never wanted their money. I worked 3 part-time jobs to pay for my own tuition. I just wanted a family. The raw, innocent agony in his voice pierced straight through my chest. I leaned forward, wrapped my arms around his frail shoulders, and pulled him into a firm, protective embrace, mindful of his fractured ribs. Arden stiffened in shock. For years, the only touch he had received from the Carlisle family was cold detachment or physical violence. But as the warmth of my embrace sank in, the wall of defense he had built around his heart finally shattered. He buried his face into my shoulder and began to weep, loud, gut-wrenching sobs that shook his entire body. Cry it out, I whispered, resting my hand on the back of his head. Cry as much as you need. But when the tears dry, we settle the score. Every drop of blood they took from you, they will pay back 100-fold. 3 days later. The presidential suite of the Rathai Grand Hotel. Bryn Carlisle paced back and forth across the plush carpet, her phone pressed tightly to her ear. The room was littered with unopened luggage and half-empty coffee cups. What do you mean the shipments are blocked? Bryn shouted into the receiver. We have an exclusive procurement contract with the Border Customs. Our trucks are carrying over $40 million in raw imperial jade for the Harstead 30th anniversary gala. The voice on the other end was frantic. Ms. Carlisle, Customs just received an emergency directive from the Regional Mining Authority. All Carlisle Group export permits have been suspended indefinitely pending a source origin investigation. We can't even get past the first checkpoint. Who authorized this? A man named Cade Brennan, the agent replied, his voice dropping to a whisper. Ms. Carlisle, you don't understand. Brennan isn't just a merchant. He owns 40% of the jade veins in Rathai, and the border security commanders drink tea in his courtyard every Sunday. If he says our stones don't move, they don't move. Bryn threw the phone onto the couch, her chest heaving. The door to the adjoining bedroom clicked open, and Corbin walked out, wearing a designer silk robe, a glass of iced juice in his hand. He looked slightly annoyed. Bryn, why are you screaming so early in the morning? Corbin whined, sitting down on the armchair. When are we flying back to Harstead? Rathai is filthy. The air smells like dirt, and the food is disgusting. Bryn turned on him, her eyes burning. When are we flying back? Our entire annual exhibition stock is locked at the border. If we don't bring those rough stones back to Harstead by Friday, Dad's merger with the Vance conglomerate falls through. The stock will crater 40%. Corbin rolled his eyes. Then just pay the fine. Or call Dad to use his political connections. Why are you stressing over a backwater hillbilly like Cade Brennan? He smirked, taking a sip of juice. Besides, Arden's gone. Even if that Brennan guy took him, what can they do? Arden is a nobody with a criminal record back home. Once we get to Harstead, Dad and Mom won't care about a stray. Bryn looked at Corbin, and for the first time in her life, a sudden chill ran down her spine. A stray? She remembered the look in Arden's eyes when Cade had pulled his coat open in that damp corridor. She remembered the blackened, charred skin from the electric shocks. She remembered how Arden hadn't even begged her, he had simply looked at her with pure, hollow despair. Corbin, Bryn said slowly, her voice dropping. When you told me Arden pushed you down the stairs at the manor, did you really see him do it? Corbin froze for a split second, the glass in his hand trembling slightly. But his expression recovered instantly, twisting into a look of hurt and indignation. Bryn. How could you ask me that? Corbin sprang to his feet, eyes welling. With fake tears. I'm your real brother. We share the same blood. My leg was in a cast for 3 weeks. Are you taking the side of an outsider over me? He stepped closer, grabbing her arm. Arden hated me from the day I came back. He hired those thugs to ruin my reputation at school, and when I confronted him, he shoved me. You saw the security report yourself. Bryn looked at Corbin's tearful face. For the past year, every time Corbin cried, the entire family bent over backward to appease him, drowning him in luxury, desperate to make up for the 20 years he had spent away from them. And in return, Arden had been stripped of his car, his allowance, his bedroom, and finally, his freedom. Before Bryn could answer, her phone buzzed on the coffee table. It was an encrypted text message from an unknown number. She picked it up and tapped the screen. It was an audio file, followed by a video clip. With trembling fingers, Bryn hit play. Audio recording, make sure the voltage is high enough to leave permanent scarring, but don't stop his heart. MS. Carlisle thinks this is just discipline. But I want him crippled. If he can still walk after a week, none of you get the rest of the cash. The voice on the recording was crisp, arrogant, and unmistakably Corbin's. Bryn's breath caught in her throat. Her blood turned to ice. She opened the video. It was a high-angle security camera feed from the second-floor landing of the Carlisle Manor from 3 months ago. On the screen, Arden was standing near the railing, holding a stack of books. Corbin walked up behind him, glanced at the hidden camera angle, suddenly threw himself down the stairs, and began screaming bloody murder before Arden had even turned around. The floating text popped up in my vision from across town. The bomb has been dropped. Bryn is watching the truth unfold right in front of her face. Corbin doesn't know that Cade has already hacked the Carlisle estate's wiped server backups. In the hotel suite, Bryn slowly raised her head, her face completely drained of color. Corbin. She whispered, her voice trembling violently. What did you do? Corbin looked at the glowing screen of her phone, and the smug entitlement on his face shattered into raw, naked panic. Harstead was a city of glass, steel, and ruthless ambition. At the Grand Hyatt Hotel in the center of the financial district, the Carlisle Group's 30th anniversary gala was in full swing. Hundreds of guests from high society, corporate titans, media moguls, and political figures mingled beneath crystal chandeliers, champagne flutes chiming against the hum of classical strings. At the center of the ballroom stood Silas Carlisle, the patriarch, and his wife, Eleanor. Silas, where are Bryn and Corbin? Eleanor asked nervously, adjusting her diamond necklace. The keynote presentation starts in 20 minutes. The Vance Group's chairman is already asking about the master stone for the new joint venture. Silas checked his gold watch, frowning. Bryn called earlier saying their flight was delayed from Rathai, but she assured me she had secured the finest imperial jade specimen on the market. Without that stone to anchor the exhibition, the merger contract won't be signed tonight. Just then, the main doors of the ballroom swung open. Bryn walked in. She was dressed in a dark gown, but her face was pale, her eyes hollow, and her posture stiff. Behind her, Corbin followed quietly, his head down, looking jumpy and pale, his usual arrogant swagger completely absent. Bryn. There you are. Eleanor rushed over, grasping her daughter's cold hands. Where is the stone? Did you bring the rough specimen from Rathai? Bryn looked at her mother, then glanced at Silas. Her voice was flat, devoid of life. The shipments were impounded. There is no stone. What? Silas's face darkened in an instant. He stepped forward, his voice a harsh whisper. Are you out of your mind? Do you know what's at stake tonight? If we don't present that stone, our credit lines will be frozen by midnight. Who dared impound our cargo? The owner of the Rathai jade veins, Bryn said numbly. Cade Brennan. Silas sneered. A border warlord? A common smuggler? We are the Carlisle family. I will have our legal team file an international injunction by morning. You won't have to wait until morning, Mr. Carlisle. A deep, commanding voice resonated across the entrance of the grand ballroom. The ambient chatter of the ballroom cut out instantly. Every guest turned toward the grand entrance. Standing at the double doors were 8 tall men in tailored charcoal suits, flanking a middle-aged man in a bespoke black trench coat. His presence was overwhelming, his sharp, weathered features carrying the unmistakable aura of someone who had ruled through blood and iron. And walking beside him, dressed in an immaculate white tuxedo, standing tall and proud, was Arden. The bruises on Arden's face had healed, replaced by a radiant, healthy glow. His posture was no longer hunched or defensive, he stood with his head held high. His sharp jawline and deep, intelligent eyes reflecting the brilliant lights of the chandeliers. On his lapel sat a single, flawless piece of emerald jade. Carved into the shape of a soaring hawk, a piece worth more than the entire ballroom's decorations combined. The guests erupted into murmurs. Isn't that Arden Carlisle? The fake son who was kicked out 3 months ago. Look at that jade on his lapel, that's top-grade glass imperial green. Where did he get that? Who is the man beside him? Look at the security detail. That's the Brennan crest. Eleanor gasped, taking a step back. Arden. Corbin shrank behind Silas, his teeth chattering in terror. The floating text flickered across my vision. The entire Harstead elite is watching. The Vance conglomerate chairman has just recognized Cade Brennan as the sole supplier of international raw jade in the Eastern Hemisphere. Silas Carlisle has no idea the executioner has arrived. I walked slowly down the red carpet, my boots clicking against the marble floor. Arden matching my stride step for step. We stopped 5 feet from the Carlisle family. Silas forced a stern expression, trying to assert his authority. Arden. How dare you show your face here after what you did? And who is this man you've brought to disrupt our corporate gala? Arden didn't flinch. He looked Silas in the eye, his voice calm, clear, and steady. My name is not Arden Carlisle, he said, his voice carrying to every corner of the room. My name is Leo Brennan. And this is my father, Cade Brennan. A collective gasp swept through the hall. Silas's eyes widened. Brennan? The Jade King of Rathai. I stepped forward, taking the center of the floor. I didn't raise my voice, but the weight behind my words commanded total silence. Mr. Carlisle, I said, looking down at the patriarch. 3 months ago, your family accused my son of theft, attempted assault, and corporate espionage. You stripped him of his dignity, threw him into the street, and your daughter shipped him to an underground human trafficking den in Rathai to be tortured and auctioned. The room erupted into chaos. High society guests turned to look at Bryn and Silas in absolute horror. Trafficking? They sold their own adopted son to a border den? My God. Is that true? Look at Bryn's face, she isn't denying it. Lies. Slander. Silas shouted, his face turning purple with rage. He signaled the hotel security guards. Security. Get these trespassers out of here. Immediately. They're trying to sabotage our merger. None of the hotel security moved. Tate and our men stood like stone walls at every exit, their hands resting on their jacket lapels, radiating a lethal energy that froze the venue staff in their tracks. You want proof, Silas? I turned slightly. Tate. Put it on the main projector. Right away, boss. Tate tapped a tablet. The massive 400-inch LED screen behind the main stage flickered. The celebratory presentation of the Carlisle Group's 30th anniversary vanished. In its place, crystal-clear high-definition surveillance footage filled the screen. The entire ballroom watched in stunned silence as the video played. Corbin, standing at the top of the stairs, smiling coldly at the camera, waiting until Arden had his back turned, and then deliberately throwing himself backward down the steps. Next came the bank transaction records, 5 transfers from Corbin's private account totaling $500,000, sent to a criminal syndicate in Rathai with the memo: permanent disablement of Arden Carlisle. Finally, the audio recording blasted through the state-of-the-art sound system. Make sure the voltage is high enough to leave permanent scarring. MS. Carlisle thinks this is just discipline, but I want him crippled. The evidence was undeniable, absolute, and crushing. Eleanor Carlisle clutched her chest, staggering back into a table of champagne glasses, sending them crashing to the floor. Corbin, you did this. Corbin fell to his knees on the stage, weeping hysterically, grabbing Silas's pants. Dad, it's fake. They generated it with AI. They're framing me. I'm your real son. You have to protect me. Silas stared at the giant screen, his hands shaking violently. He looked at Corbin, then at the horrified faces of his corporate partners and the media. Reporters whose cameras were flashing non-stop. You. Silas raised a trembling hand and struck Corbin across the face with a deafening crack. You worthless animal. You destroyed our family. Corbin crashed to the ground, holding his bleeding lip, screaming in terror. The floating text scrolled rapidly. Corbin's reputation is officially incinerated. The Vance conglomerate chairman is tearing up the merger contract right now in the VIP lounge. Federal economic and criminal investigation officers have just arrived at the hotel entrance. In the middle of the ruined ballroom, Bryn Carlisle walked toward Arden like a ghost. Her designer dress was disheveled, her eyes bloodshot and swollen from days of unshed tears. She stopped 3 feet from Arden, her knees trembling so badly she could barely stay upright. Arden. She sobbed, reaching out a shaking hand toward his sleeve. Arden. I didn't know. I swear to God, I didn't know Corbin went that far. I thought. They were just going to keep you in a holding room for a few days to teach you. To respect the family. Arden took half a step back, letting her hand fall through the empty air. His expression wasn't angry. It was something far worse, complete, absolute indifference. You didn't know? Arden asked quietly. Bryn, when they locked me in the cellar, I called your phone 32 times. You blocked my number. When Corbin accused me of stealing his watch, I offered to let you search my room, but you had your guards throw all my mother's old photos into the incinerator instead. Arden looked at the woman who had called herself his sister for 20 years. When I was 15, Eleanor needed a rare bone marrow match for her leukemia. Who gave it to her? Eleanor, standing nearby, froze, her breath hitching in her throat. I did, Arden said, his voice steady. I spent 2 weeks in the hospital with severe anemia so she could live. When you were 22 and crashed your car while driving drunk, who took the blame and sat in a holding cell for 48 hours so the Carlisle stock wouldn't crash? Bryn's knees finally gave out. She collapsed onto the marble floor, her hands clutching at Arden's shoes. I did, Arden continued softly. For 20 years, I gave every piece of my life to protect this family because I thought you loved me. But the second your real brother walked through the door, you treated me like dirt you couldn't wash off fast enough. Arden, please. Bryn wept, her forehead touching the cold marble floor. Forgive me, please, come home. I'll give you everything. I'll give you my shares in the company, just call me sister again. Arden looked down at her, his eyes clear and untainted by regret. You stopped being my sister the second you put a price tag on my life, Arden said. My name is Leo Brennan. And the Carlisle family has nothing left that I want. He turned away from her, walking back to stand at my side. I placed a firm, warm hand on his shoulder. Silas Carlisle rushed forward, his face pale, his voice trembling with desperate pleading. Mr. Brennan. Leo. We raised him for 20 years. You can't just destroy the Carlisle group. Our credit lines, our supply chains, please, we can negotiate a compensation package. I looked at Silas Carlisle as if looking at an insect beneath my heel. Compensation? I said coldly. Every asset, every mining permit, and every distribution license your company holds will be acquired by Brennan Industries. At bankruptcy auction by noon tomorrow. You have 12 hours to pack your personal belongings and vacate your manor. You can't do this. Silas screamed. This is Harstead. This is the world, I replied. And wherever my son walks, you have no ground to stand on. The sirens wailed outside the Grand Hyatt Hotel. A squad of federal agents and metropolitan police officers marched into the ballroom, led by a senior investigator holding an arrest warrant. Corbin Carlisle, the investigator announced, his voice echoing over the ruined gala. You are under arrest for attempted murder, conspiracy to commit cross-border human trafficking, and corporate fraud. Corbin screamed like a wild animal as 2 officers pinned him to the ground, clicking steel handcuffs around his wrists. Dad. Bryn. Save me. I didn't do it. It was Sal. It was Sal Keever. Corbin shrieked, kicking wildly as he was dragged down the red carpet toward the exit, his expensive clothes tearing against the floor. The guests parted like the Red Sea, recording the pathetic spectacle on their phones. Within minutes, the footage of Corbin Carlisle's arrest would become the top trending topic across the entire nation. Silas Carlisle collapsed into an armchair, clutching his chest as paramedics rushed into the ballroom with an oxygen mask. The Carlisle group, built over 3 decades of ruthless exploitation, had crumbled to dust in a single evening. Eleanor sat on the floor beside the shattered glass, weeping uncontrollably, staring at the empty space where Arden had stood. Bryn remained on her knees, staring blankly at the double doors through which we had already departed. The floating text appeared one last time above the ruined stage. The Carlisle group declared bankruptcy 48 hours later. Corbin Carlisle was sentenced to 25 years in maximum security without parole. Bryn Carlisle resigned from all public roles, spending the rest of her days in a small rental apartment, holding Arden's old school drawings, drowned in eternal regret. The Brennan family's missing heir has returned. The score is settled. 2 weeks later. Northern Rathai. The morning sun rose over the vast mountain range, casting a golden hue over the endless green canopy of the jade-rich valleys. The air was crisp, scented with pine and the rich, earthy smell of raw stone. At the highest observation pavilion overlooking the Brennan mining territory, Arden, now officially Leo Brennan, stood leaning against the carved wooden railing, holding a warm cup of herbal tea. He was wearing a simple dark jacket, his face relaxed and serene. The shadows that had haunted his eyes for months had completely vanished, replaced by a quiet, unshakable confidence. I walked up beside him, resting my hands on the railing. The border customs cleared the new distribution routes this morning, I said, looking out over the mountains. The Harstead Port Authority has transferred all of the Carlisle Group's old logistics hubs under your name. If you want to go back and run the operations in Harstead, it's yours. If you want to stay in Rathai and learn the stone trade, the mountains are yours. Leo took a slow sip of his tea, looking out at the golden horizon where the earth met the sky. I don't need Harstead anymore, Leo said, turning his head to look at me with a genuine, warm smile. Those 20 years felt like a long nightmare. But standing here, with you, I finally feel awake. He reached into his pocket and pulled out the smooth, flawless piece of imperial green jade I had given him in the clinic, letting it catch the morning light. Dad, he said softly. The word sounded natural, sweet, and heavy with 15 years of longing. Yes, son. Teach me how to read the stones. I smiled, clapping a strong hand onto his shoulder, feeling the solid, unbreakable strength of my flesh and blood standing beside me. Come on then, I said, turning toward the mountain path. Let's go look at our mountain. The floating text that had accompanied me across the border flickered in the sunlight, typed out one final, glowing line. Mission accomplished. Happy life, boss and young master. With a soft shimmer, the text dissolved into the morning light, leaving behind only the clear blue sky, the emerald mountains, and a father and son walking together into a future that belonged entirely to them.